came in from George Dickel, not this Nicole, although you're phenomenal too, and Nicole Austin, so master distiller for George Dickel. And the first thing she said when I came in was, "You look hot." So for anyone else that feels hot because you're looking at me, I arrived at 2 a.m., my luggage did not. So you're looking at day 2 of the same thing as yesterday. Didn't have makeup, I don't have, Nicole showed up with a flat iron, I don't know how to use her flat iron, so my hair just kept growing. So if I'm making you hot, I do apologize. It was better than the alternative, which is naked. Maybe not better than the alternative, but it is at least, more decent. My naked is kind of freaking awesome, let me tell you. My naked is pretty good. So, Uncle Nearest, we have now officially in 2 years, we launched in July of 2017. We have won 40 awards, including those. But we've won every top award except San Francisco. So, yeah, but that doesn't really count. But everything else, we've pretty much won the top. And we are a premium whiskey from Tennessee. So, the reason why I wanted to do this particular topic is because everywhere I travel around the world, I have gotten the same thing. So, for those of you who are in here, who believes that Kentucky Bourbon is more premium than Tennessee whiskey? Hands up. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Listen, if no hands are up, that means we're doing a damn good job in the marketplace. Because 2 years ago, every hand would be up. How many hands went up? 2? Whose hand went up? This is like the shyness. All right. So let's kind of go through Kentucky Bourbon versus Tennessee whiskey. Usually I'm the person who does all the speaking, but because we have team members here, it's Tales of the Cocktail, so we have more than usual. I sent them texts at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hey, I'm going to throw you guys into this. Might as well, you're going to be there." So Richie, who's our national ambassador in Kentucky, but don't listen to his accent because he's originally from the UK, so it sounds like he's from Boston, but he's not. He's, a weird combination. But he was with Jim Beam for 5 years, and he headed up national accounts for Kentucky, yes?
I was a corporate taster and educator, okay. Based out of Louisville, Kentucky, in their home market. So.
Got it. Yeah. So what I asked for Richie to do is to give us the bourbon side of it, because I am learning that most people do not know the difference between Tennessee whiskey and Kentucky bourbon. Now, I say Kentucky bourbon even though bourbon can be made anywhere. They were not smart enough, like champagne was, or like cognac was, or like Tennessee whiskey was, to say, we're locking it down to Kentucky. Someone didn't think about that until it was too late. So you can make bourbon anywhere. But most people think that there is a big difference. Are any of you with BBS, with Black Bourbon Society by chance? No one? Okay, so Kate, the most light-skinned member of Black Bourbon Society. Two, there we go, the two, okay, really guys? We gotta talk to Black Bourbon Society about their membership, But there has been this big debate, and it goes on, it almost seems like every week, where there's people going back and forth as to whether or not Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. So, Richie is going to tell you all the attributes of bourbon, and then I'll chime in when Tennessee whiskey is applicable.
Do I have to go to the bar?
No, you're good.
Okay, I'll come up front here. I'll try to talk as loud as I can. So, there's really an easy way to memorize and remember what constitutes Kentucky bourbon, or bourbon in general, sorry. So if we take you all the way back to 1964, that's when the laws for bourbon were passed by Congress, headed up by Lyndon B. Johnson, who was president at the time. And what they said was, the easy way to remember it that I use is just A, B, C, D, E for the rules. So A is for America, and just like Fawn said, it's a little bit of a misconception that bourbon has to come from Kentucky. It doesn't. It can be from anywhere in America. It just so happens that 95% of it is made in Kentucky for a few different historical reasons. The B that we talk about is for the barrel. Bourbon has to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel every time. You cannot reuse the barrels. The reason that that law came into effect had a lot to do with lobbying at the time from the forestry industry, but it is actually really beneficial for the whiskey. It means that all those caramelized wood sugars on the inside of the barrel, they're only getting utilized one time, and so you have the maximum amount of penetration between the wood sugar and the whiskey to give it the most amount of flavor possible. And so once those barrels have been used once, they then get shipped around the world to places like Canada and Mexico, to Scotland and France to age different products like cognacs and tequilas and Canadian whiskey. So the C is for corn. When you're making your recipe or your mash bill, you have to use majority corn. So the recipe has to be at least 51% corn. The other 49% can be any grains that you like, but most folks in the industry will use rye and malted barley. A traditional bourbon recipe is going to be about 75% corn, 15% rye, and 10% malted barley. But it doesn't have to be. And then the D is for distillation. This is the hardest one to remember because it's got a few numbers involved. So you have to distill the whiskey to below 160 proof or below. You have to put the whiskey in the barrel to start aging at 125 proof or below. And then you have to put it in the bottle at 80 proof or above. And then the E is for extras. And so there's a law that you cannot add any extras into the bourbon other than water. And so other folks in the industry and different types of whiskey will use additives like colorings and flavorings to enhance the taste. But Kentucky bourbon is completely natural, is 100% pure. There is never any additives put into it other than just pure Kentucky spring water.
All right, so that is, come on in, so that is bourbon. So give me, what does the A stand for?
America.
Tennessee whiskey must be made in Tennessee, but it is still also must be made in America. Give me the B.
Barrel.
Tennessee whiskey must be aged in new American oak barrels that have been charred. C.
Corn.
Tennessee whiskey must be 51% corn. D.
Distillation.
Distillation is 160 on the high side, highest you can go in. 125 into the barrels, the highest you can go in. 80 proof and above is what it needs to be in the bottle. And E.
Extras.
Only place it differentiates. Tennessee whiskey can put up to 2% of color, flavoring, things of that nature. We do not, but it is allowed in Tennessee whiskey. Those are the two differences. Where is Steven? Limestone water.
Yes. So
Tell us a little bit about that.
We are fortunate. We own the farmhouse that's on the front of this bottle in front of you guys, and we came with this farm dog, and I remember Fawn and got some water from the faucet, and the dog never touched it because it knows where the spring water is. So even our animals know how great the water is. But we sit on the same limestone shelf that Kentucky is in, and that just creates for us phenomenal water. That's where it all starts. And via that limestone, it's obviously filtering out any of the iron. We get the perfect pH from that. That iron being filtered out of the whiskey, not only does it add an extremely bitter flavor to it, but it can actually, after the aging, have sort of black green tint to it. So that's what creates this beautiful amber color in front of you guys here. And it really is, the temperature it comes out, everything, it couldn't be better for whiskey, and that's why we get such phenomenal whiskey in both places.
So the reason why the best whiskey coming out of America is coming from Kentucky and Tennessee is we both sit on the same limestone shelf. That basically means if you dig down on almost any farm in Middle Tennessee, you will hit water and limestone. It's what you're going to do. So that water is coming in and naturally filtering over limestone, pulling out everything that you don't want, but putting in a few minerals that make whiskey great, really make the water great, but because of that, it makes the whiskey great. So I don't know if you guys caught this, but Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. That is the legal definition is straight bourbon. The only place that it distinguishes in NAFTA. When the trade agreement was done, it specified that Tennessee whiskey was unique and distinct, but it specifies that it is a straight bourbon in the legal definition that must be made in Tennessee, and it's one additional step. So we're sharing more. Our head of whiskey operations, so 31 years in the Tennessee whiskey business. So anytime you see somebody where there's been a profile that says they're the first female in operations or to oversee operations and yada, 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 it's not true. She just hasn't done profiles in press. When did you begin in the Tennessee whiskey business?
1975.
And when you retired from Jack Daniel as the director of whiskey operations was what year?
And 2000.
So, whenever you see something that gives someone credit who began in 2000, just shoot them a quick note and go, we're really proud of what you did. You're just not the first, and it's okay. But Sherry Moore, I asked her to talk us through very quickly, because there are such things as whiskey nerds. She is a whiskey production nerd, and she can be here for the next 3 hours and on the same.
Okay.
What makes Tennessee whiskey spectacular?
Okay. And I'm going to start with the steps to do it, and then I'm going to end with what I think are the two biggest reasons for doing it. And one you're going to hear some about, and another one I hardly ever hear anybody say. It's because they don't understand the process. So we'll start with the steps. So sugar maple has always been used, and we're still using it. And basically, one reason is it's so available. Sugar maple is kind of like your limestone. It's there. So the wood is cut, is set out, weedy. My background is you cut it into 2x2 strips, 48 inches. You stack that, you leave it outside, you let the sun, the humidity, and even the fungus really age that wood. And it gets a lot of the junk out of it. So then you burn it, and burning this wood to make the charcoal, you've got that, and it's all done manual, and you've got that step up. You can't add too much water or you put it out. But if you don't put some water on there, it's going to make you soup. So there's just a technique, and it's time taken to train people to make charcoal like that. We can agree. Then it's cool, and then it is ground. So we grind it so that we don't want it too fine, but we want enough surface area. And when it's put in the vat, that whiskey is going to go through channels in that charcoal. So it's put in the vats. Now we call them vats. I don't even know exactly why, but we put it in the vats, and the whiskey goes through that. So one of the first steps is when you put in a new batch, and you're going to have your when you put it in your container, you're going to have wool in it and on top of the charcoal, and then you're going to have some kind of system where it goes down slow. So it has been days going down that. And one of the things is when you start a vat, is your first goes into hands and tails tank. Because the first that goes through there is not filtered. It's kind of setting that filter. You've got to do that. So it goes into hands and tails tank. And once that filter, we go back to the profile, we see that vat is operating. So it's going to go through, and then it may go for, a time period is 20 years volume, but it can go to 3 to 6 months. But what we do is taste. We haven't gotten ours set up, and we're working with a co-packer, is we'll taste that batch every week. We have a trained sensory panel, and we'll be tasting that to determine is it still changing that taste profile. Because you can taste it. You can run a GC analysis, and you can see it here. But you can taste it. And we went by, I've always talked about the taste profile more than the GC, but the two go together. So we go through there.
60 seconds, Sherry.
Okay.
60 seconds, and it's a countdown.
There's the two. And so one is we said it's going to filter things out. But the second is the consistency going in the barrel. You're going to have so many more
that the two start identical, and Tennessee whiskey is bourbon plus one additional step. What is the cost?
The cost.
And the time.
You're going to take about 2 weeks, and I'm going to say roughly you're going to add 25% of your distillation cost. For PG.
So,
And a lot has to do with volume on that, and it varies. But especially for the small ones starting up, this is a very expensive step to incorporate.
when I came to whiskey, I was introduced to whiskey, a whiskey that I like. Now, folks kept trying to give me scotch, and for all you scotch lovers, God bless you. I just can't do it. I found one scotch that I like, Johnny Walker Blue. I keep it on my back shelf just in case someone says, let's have scotch. That's it. But when I came and found a whiskey that I loved, it was E.H. Taylor, single barrel, barrel proof. That is what brought me into whiskey. That is what made me love whiskey. So I began with bourbon, and I began with a bias against Tennessee whiskey. And then I began chasing the story of Nearest Green, the first African-American master distiller on record in the United States. And this remarkable relationship between Nearest Green and his mentee and his, pupil, if you will, Jack Daniel. And how their families, after he was gone, made sure that Nearest's name continued to be spoken about in Lynchburg, continued to be written down, was cemented in that manner, and continued for at least every generation that Jack's family ran that distillery. And the story is what brought me to Tennessee whiskey. But I got here with a bias against it because I had heard through the grapevine that it was inferior to Kentucky Bourbon. And then I started making it and realized how damn expensive it is to make it bourbon plus this additional step. You don't put that in except to make the whiskey better. So then I began thinking, well, if it's not the process, why do people believe that Kentucky Bourbon is better? So I actually went back to the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. Jack Daniel, who I believe is the best marketer, personally to this day, best PR person we've ever seen in this industry. I'm trying to rival him a little bit, but I think he kind of in his day had his thing. He knew exactly where to be to make sure that the people tasted his product and they saw him. But when I looked at the ads, he would place one every Friday. And it would simply say it was the best. It's from Lynchburg, Tennessee. And then it had a fib in there. God bless him, he was a marketer. But then all the other ads from the distributors would show all the different pints of whiskey, or the gallons, depending on when it was, and their prices, and their sale prices. And every bourbon was on sale every single week. And there was one brand that was never on sale. And it was a little 5'2" guy coming out of Tennessee. So then I thought, well, if it was the most premium then, how did we get to a place where we think that Kentucky Bourbon is more premium than Tennessee whiskey? So then I thought, well, it must be the age. People must be saying that because those in Tennessee traditionally have not aged it and bottled it that long. And then we went to Dickel. And my husband got a 17-year-old for a frickin' fortune. Listen, it's obviously very good because he keeps going back and buying them. But they're in $375. What do you sell them for?
$125.
$375. And so we knew that this could not last forever. And so he enjoyed it, and he had friends over, they enjoyed it. And so we decided we would collect the bottles. So we would go to Dickel, which is down the street from us because we live in Lynchburg, Tennessee. We would go to Dickel, he would buy a few bottles to collect. Then we would come home and he'd have friends over and drink the bottles. And this went on like every other weekend. And so finally I went to Dickel and bought a bunch of 17-year-olds and hid them. He has they're at his mother's house actually, but he doesn't know where they are. I said, these are going to be collectors. So that 17-year-old changed my thought process about that. But then I went up to Kentucky. Has anyone tasted Peerless? Has anyone had their 3-year-old? My whole team, apparently. My whole team, everybody's hands went up, nobody else's. I actually believe that their master distiller, Caleb, is a prodigy. At 29 years old, I have never tasted anything that young that is that spectacular. So it can't be the age. So then the question becomes, who determined Kentucky Bourbon was more premium? Marketing. The difference in the premiums is the marketing. Tennessee whiskey went after one set of folks. Kentucky Bourbon went after another set of folks. But when you talk about the process and what we do and how much it costs to do what we do, how much more time it takes before it ever hits the barrel, there is absolutely no question that in the battle of the premiums, we gotta give it to Tennessee whiskey. Just is. So what you have in front of you, Uncle Nearest, 1884, 1856, and 1820. The years all signify something. 1820 is the year that we believe that Nearest Green was born in Maryland. However, there's no way to know. As African Americans, it's the same as essentially tracking cattle. We were property, not considered people. We did not have birth certificates, nor did we know our birth dates, nor did we know the calendar days of the week. So there would be no way to truly track 365 days. We were uneducated in the American system. We're coming from Africa. We speak that language. We're dropped into another place in which we don't look like anyone and we do not recognize the language whatsoever. So knowing a slave's actual birthday is very difficult. Frederick Douglass, who we all celebrate his birthday as February 14th, literally picked that date out of the sky. 1856 is the year that we believe that Nearest Green helped to perfect the Tennessee whiskey process. That home that is on our bottle, we own that, and that is where we house until our distillery is finished. Phase 1 opens this September. Until that is finished and all of the artifacts go over there. To piece together the story of Nearest Green, we hired, put together, pulled together 20 historians, archaeologists, archivists, genealogists, and conservators, and pulled about roughly 10,000 original artifacts and documents from 6 different states, brought into that house. And people from the community came and brought their own documents that they had in their basements when they bought the house or in their attics, and they had Green as a last name. And it helped us to begin to piece together this amazing story of Nearest Green. The reason why we believe that 1856 is the year that he perfected Tennessee whiskey is because Jack Daniel's biography, Jack Daniel's Legacy, shows him going to the farm of Dan Call, who owned that farmhouse, and going there as a chore boy in 1856. And when he arrived, Nearest Green was already the best whiskey maker in the area. So that means he would have had to have perfected it by that time. In 1884, I'm very, very, very proud to say you guys are the very first people outside of our company to taste it. We do not officially release it until Tuesday, but we are quite certain that this will become the whiskey that we are known for. And it's not just because of what is in the bottle, it's not just because of the juice, but it's also because of the significance. 1884 is the last year that Nearest Green put his own whiskey in the barrel. And this bottle is the very first bottle in which every single bit of juice, the barrels selected by me, and the blends curated by a Nearest Green descendant. And on the back of every bottle is that descendant's signature. So, if you flip it over, that descendant is right there. Victoria Ely Butler. So what you are going to taste is her blend. So you want to talk about your process of getting to the blend?
Well, I am so excited and extremely humble to have my name on the back of this bottle. I told them last night I wasn't going to cry, but here it comes.
I don't remember that claim.
I would have never ever thought that this would happen. But my family is just over the moon about it. But in regards to the process, Fawn, Richie, Fawn Weaver, the four of us tasted close to 30 notes of juice and then selected, they let me select the juice that we blended to put in this bottle. And it was about 20 notes of juice that we blended and put into this bottle. So I hope you all like it. It is really good.
If she does say so herself.
It is. It's really good. When we had the opportunity to taste the finished process, or the finished product rather, I was so pleased, so happy, so excited. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Like Fawn said, I think this is the one that we're really going to be known for. With every descendant's name on the back. The one thing that's going to be different about this liquor, or the other thing, other than it being selected by a descendant, it's going to taste different because each descendant will be putting their blend together. So each bottle, each batch will be different. So mine is the first,
Woo!
and I'm claiming it's the best.
Yeah! So I'll give you just notes on age on each of those. Until 1884, we have never had any juice in our bottles that is younger than 8 years old. And I actually did not think that we would ever have juice in our bottles younger than 8 years old. And then the 7-year-old started to come of age. For anyone who doesn't know, I imagine you do know, all of our product is originally sourced, everything that is in the marketplace now. And that's because we've not been around long enough to have made our own, and what we have been laying down for the last 2 years, you won't actually taste for another 5 years. But we don't simply source and bottle. We source and age it longer. So these have been in our warehouse for at least the last 2 years. We age it for longer, and then we decide when it is ready. And when it's ready, it comes out, and we do 2 additional processes before it ever goes into a bottle. The first is we take the whiskey and we run it through, we filter it through natural carbon from coconut shells. So that charcoal mellowing process that we begin with already takes out some of the congeners. But when that comes out of the barrel, there's still a lot of stuff in there you really don't want, because number one, for all the folks who didn't make it to here for 10 a.m. because they had hangovers, they could have chosen the wrong whiskey last night. It's a very high probability. But when you take the time to remove the congeners with the natural carbon from coconut shells, but we don't stop there, we then take all of that whiskey and sit it in steel, vats, tankers, for about 24 hours in diatomaceous earth. Now, if you go into your health food store, you will see that utilized to cleanse your body. It does the same thing with whiskey. It attaches to it and pulls out everything we don't want in the final product. That is why when you taste it, it is so smooth. And if you drink a half a bottle, although I'm very clear to say the family of Nearest Green reminds you to drink responsibly and honorably. But if you so happen to drink a half a bottle, you will not wake up the next morning with a hangover. That is due to the last 2 processes that we do. So you have 1884 is a 7-year-old. That is what's in there now. However, those barrels will continue to age. So the next descendant has already been chosen. Each descendant chooses what descendant will come after them. So the next descendant who will be on the back of the bottle has already been chosen, and we will begin going through the process of that batch. But 5 descendants from now, they may be working with an 8-year-old. 10 descendants from now, they may be working with a 9-year-old, which is why we don't put an age statement on here, because they require you to put the youngest your whiskey is, and we don't know how old it's going to go to by the time it gets in there. 1856 is a blend of 8 to 10-year-old. Sometimes we throw in some 11-year-old, but for the most part, the majority of it is 8 to 10-year-old. And 1820 is always 11 years old. It has always been, and probably will always be 11 years old, but that will always be its minimum. So taste in whatever word you like.
Taste mine first.
She's like, I don't want you messing up your taste buds by going with the 1820 is also barrel proof. The 1884 is 93 proof, and that also has significance. Every bit of this 1884, we really dove into what do we think Nearest actually had in the marketplace. Why were people so in love with his whiskey when it was in the market? And so a lot of historians have come together to try to determine where do we believe that his whiskey was actually put into the jugs at. So when it was leaving the distillery, it was leaving in barrels at that time. But it would go to the distributors, and the distributors would then put it in jugs. They would add a little bit of water. So between Clay Risen, Fred Minnick, Chris Smith that's in Australia, I just literally hammered them with every question I possibly could to narrow down what was the likely proof in the jugs of Nearest's whiskey. And it's been narrowed down to being somewhere between 92 and 94. And that is the reason why it is 93 proof.
You said how old again?
7. So the 1884 is 7 years old, 1856 is a blend of 8 to 10, 1820 is 11. That's why I'm not speaking. It's kind of like when you're eating something that's really good and you just don't want anybody to talk to you. Say that again? It's distributed. The question down here was, is it distributed in California? So as of earlier this week, it was distributed in 49 states. And we put up a post that was basically to our whiskey family, for anyone here that's a part of our online whiskey family, thanking them for this incredible year and announcing that we were, just kind of some rundown of stats, 49 states, 10 countries that were actually on shelves, shipping into 148 countries, at least 1 million glasses of Uncle Nearest. I'll say it again, at least 1 million glasses of Uncle Nearest have been raised in salute to that man, at the very least. And we just kind of ran down our 40 awards. And then in the caption, we put, "Your move, Delaware." By 7 a.m., we were headed into Delaware. So we are now in 50 states and 10 countries and shipping into 148. In California, we're repped by Young's Market. And I believe California is our biggest state at this moment. Yes? Yeah. Yeah.
You're the widest distribution there. It's had some really big retailers, some great farm restaurants throughout the state.
So in California, we're in all the Trader Joe's. We just got into the Whole Foods.